The leader of the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage, has called on Boris Johnson to abandon his withdrawal agreement with the EU and form an alliance with his party in the upcoming election. Mr Farage said he'd field a candidate in every seat in Britain if the Prime Minister didn't drop his Brexit plans, which he described as a sellout. Today, Mr Johnson told the BBC that doing deals with other parties would put Jeremy Corbyn into number 10. More on that shortly, but first, here's John Pienaar.
The biggest grin in politics, but what's he got to smile about? Nigel Farage's party is trailing in the polls, but still grabbing Tory votes. So his ultimatum to Boris Johnson today, drop your deal, leave the Brexit Party to fight Labour in many Leave voting areas, or we'll take on Tories across the country.
There are around about 150 seats in this country that are Labour-held constituencies that the Conservative Party have never, ever won in their history. That, I think, is how a deal of this kind would work, a non-aggression pact of this kind would work, and I think it would be to our advantage, to their advantage, but most importantly, to Brexit's advantage.
So, an offer of friendship with a hint of menace. But what if all he does is split the Brexit vote, help Remainers win, and parties wanting another referendum? You say that you are now the only party fighting for a real Brexit. But do you accept, if you're standing in every seat across the country, you're also risking Brexit?
If the Conservative Party stand on the basis of this new EU treaty, that is not Brexit. In those circumstances, we'd be the only person standing saying we must leave the institutions of the European Union.
The Brexit Party wants a deal with the Tories, maybe needs one to be able to win seats as well as votes. Donald Trump seems to think it's a good idea for what that's worth, but Boris Johnson hasn't been tempted. So what would happen if the Brexit Party stood in seats across the country? What would that do to the outcome? Take places like Labour, Dagenham and Rainham in Essex. It's a Tory target and voted Leave. But Labour could hold on here if Brexiteers split. This issue splits families, like brothers Jeff and John.
I would vote Conservative now again. I just want to get it done. I think it's going on too long, and whatever way you are, I just think it's got to get done so we can get on with other things rather than just keep talking about Brexit.
So John, just tell me what you're thinking.
So I'm thinking Brexit. I think they need my vote, but I'm concerned that the vote to Brexit could dilute the votes to Conservative.
Now, Hazel, how are you going to vote in this election?
Labour.
Why's that?
Well, because I've always done it, always. My mum and dad have done it, so I've always done it. I've never changed. I'm too old now to change. 85, so nearly 86.
Of course, Labour's not just relying on old habits. They're promising a better deal and another referendum.
To the country as a whole, what we're saying is whether you Remain or Leave, there's a route through for you by voting Labour. For the other parties, it's either one side or the other. It's very divisive. And one of the things we want to do is to try to reunify quite an angry country.
The Tories are telling voters their Brexit will take the UK out, free to strike trade deals, set its own rules and standards. We'll have a choice of parties, a choice of Brexit or no Brexit at all on polling day, as big an influence as any perhaps, people just wanting to get it over with. John Pienaar, BBC News, Rainham in Essex.
Boris Johnson has denied Donald Trump's claim made in a radio interview with Nigel Farage yesterday that his Brexit deal with the EU could jeopardise a trade agreement between Britain and America. The Prime Minister also insisted that the deadlock over Brexit in Parliament left him with no choice but to call a general election. He's been speaking to our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg.
Are there any circumstances under which you might work with Nigel Farage?
Well, first of all, it is a great Brexit. It's a proper Brexit. It delivers exactly what we wanted, what I wanted when I campaigned in 2016 to come out of the European Union. It takes back control of our money, our borders, our laws. It enables us to do proper, all singing, all dancing, free trade deals. Now, the difficulty about doing deals with any other party is that any other party, I'm afraid, simply risks, or voting for any other party, simply risks putting Jeremy Corbyn into number 10.
There are no circumstances under which you would work with Nigel Farage.
I
That's
want to be
saying.
very clear that voting for any other party than this government, this Conservative government, this one nation Conservative government, is basically tantamount to putting Jeremy Corbyn in.
Your mutual friend, the President of the United States, thinks you should work with Nigel Farage.
Well,
Is he wrong?
always grateful for advice from wherever it comes. And we have great relations, as you know, with the US and many, many other countries. But I'm just telling you, Laura, I'm telling you what I think about the way to do this.
President Trump has also said that your Brexit deal means that you can't really do a good deal with the Americans.
Well, I don't,
is he wrong about that as well?
There's one thing he's right about, which is that there's certainly no question of negotiating on the NHS. That is absolutely true, and he's right about that. But on the technicalities of the deal, anybody who looks at it can see that the UK has full control, as one whole UK. England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland.
So the president hasn't looked at it then, because he said you can't do it, you can't trade, we can't make a trade deal with the UK. Well, so he's misunderstood it.
I don't wish to comment on what he may or may not have read. What I'm telling you is what everybody can see from the terms of the deal that we did. If we can get it over the line by with this election in the middle of January, then we'll have it done.
Why would anybody believe you on that when you have broken your promise already, where we should have been out of the EU yesterday? Well, now you've failed on that.
I bitterly regret that we haven't come out, but on the other hand, people said that we wouldn't be able to get a new deal at all.
In your first speech in Downing Street, you stood outside there and said, the buck stops here. And now this has gone wrong. You took your deal away from Parliament, like taking your bat and ball away from home, and now you're blaming them.
Well, with great respect, Laura, I don't think that Parliament I think that MPs were never going to deliver that deal on that timetable, and they weren't going to get it done.
So why did you try then?
Not just by October the 31st. It was clear from what they did, they wouldn't have done it. They wouldn't have done it by Christmas. They wouldn't have done it by January the 31st. Their strategy was to keep rope-a-doping the government and then pushing the deadline on beyond January the 31st. It would have been totally miserable.
Would you rule out expanding the use of the private sector in the health service?
Look, we are putting £34 billion into the NHS. That is taxpayers' money. And we are absolutely determined to continue to increase taxpayers' money. And what I will tell you, well, of course that there are dentists and optometrists and so on who are providers to the NHS. Of course, that's how it works. But I believe passionately in an NHS free at the point of use for everybody in this country. And if you ask me, is the NHS? Of course it isn't.
Do you worry this gamble of going to the country now might backfire for you, just as it did for Theresa May?
Honestly, Laura, that we've just got no choice. We've just got no choice. And Parliament is determined. This is a Parliament that is basically full of MPs who voted Remain, and the overwhelming bulk of the MPs in Parliament voted Remain. I love them. They're a lot of my friends, but that's the way they are. They voted Remain, and they will continue to block Brexit if they're given a chance. There was no option for us.
Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll be speaking to all the party leaders over the course of the campaign here on the BBC News at 10, and our Deputy Political Editor John Pienaar is with me. John, he's pretty categorical now, but as we get closer to the election, could Boris Johnson wobble a little bit, do you think, on whether or not to jump in bed with the Brexit Party?
Well, Clive, the Prime Minister couldn't have been clearer than we heard just there in turning down Nigel Farage's offer. It's true that Boris Johnson has made a number of cast iron pledges lately. Today was supposed to be the first day of life outside the European Union. One by one, those iron promises melted in the crucible of Brexit. But I find it simply impossible to believe that in the fortnight between now and the close of candidates' nominations on November the 14th, we'll see Boris Johnson tearing up his Brexit deal and then sharing out a new list of Labour target seats with the Brexit Party. The Tories clearly believe they are strong enough to see off the Brexit Party challenge, and hoping at the same time that the Brexit Party can hurt Labour more than them. And that will certainly happen in a number of areas. We can't know exactly how this will shake out. We can, I think, know that when we see polling day, we'll see how the splits between Leave and Remain have overwhelmed splits in many cases on party lines. We'll see splits between nations and regions of the UK, between social classes, between generations. And on a personal level, we'll see how it's strained families and friendships. All of the leaders say it's their prime mission to reunite the country. Clive, that's going to be a monumental task for them, whoever wins.
OK. John, thank you. John Pienaar.